Hi everyone, welcome back to the Watch Insider. My name is Brian and thank you all for logging on tonight. I am joined tonight by Tim Masso.
Hello.
And we have what I think is an exciting show, lots of great watches on the table, and I apologize again I didn't apologize the first time, but I am sorry for starting the show a little bit late today. We got off to a late start, but I think it should be a good show.
Yeah, good show and great watches, and actually some of the most interesting we've had in a while. For some of these watches, we are looking at firsts on the channel. I haven't featured them. They haven't featured previously on this program, and I have to say, if I were to pick these myself, frankly, it would have been 1 for 1. Brian matched my thoughts this evening. Let's save the best for last.
All right, we will save the best for last. Why don't we start? Well,
Yeah.
we'll start from this way. So, and as always, guys, this is a live show. Please feel free, ask questions, participate. We are here to answer questions, and we like a lively discussion. So here we have a Portuguese chronograph, but not your usual Portuguese chronograph. This is the 150 years edition. So this was a watch that came out. They came out with the watch in 2 variations in stainless steel. One with a white lacquer dial, one with a blue lacquer dial, both limited to 2,000 pieces. And it was the first iteration of this watch that had a sapphire crystal display back. You also have there a rose gold medallion in the movement. And when I first saw this watch, you know, I had to give my props to IWC. I knew it was a winner. I think that it was everything that customers at large sort of wanted the Portuguese chrono to sort of move into. You know, for a long time it was the same watch and it needed some updates, particularly I think the sapphire crystal display back. I think that was like numero uno that they needed to do. They've got here a rich white lacquer dial. It absolutely pops. It's hard to actually even convey it through the video. But I think that it was just a great way to sort of end the past version of the watch and to start its new beginning.
It should be mentioned that the previous 3714, which was first launched in 1998, was the all-time best-selling Portuguese reference of all time. The watch is right around 41 millimeters in stainless steel, so unlike conventional Portuguesers, which are about 42 to 44, this is a very wearable watch on a smaller wrist. A lot of that comes down to the lug shape, which is lovely, graceful, and as you can see, turns almost 90 degrees from the case band. Another feature that I love about this watch is the dial, which is handcrafted. Almost a dozen layers of lacquer, including white and clear, and all of it hand buffed at each face. The idea for the 150th anniversary series was to recreate the look of a bottomless enamel dial on a 19th century IWC pocket watch. Not just a first for the series, not just a first display case back, but here we have a first for the series mechanically. This is a 69,000 series IWC column wheel in-house chronograph caliber. The movement, for the first time, not a Valjoux 7750 derivative as in the previous 3714. This is the 3716, an impressive watch in every respect and one of the gems of the 150th anniversary series. We remember the tribute to Paul Weber because, well, frankly, it was one of the best watches of the year. It's a GPHG nominee, and frankly, I hope it wins. But this watch is the icon of IWC. The Paul Weber is a bit of a neither here nor there watch. It's not part of any model family, whereas this is the Portugueser. And if you know IWC, you know that IWC is the Portugueser and the Pilot's line. The watch is easy to wear. Again, real easy to put on the wrist. Think 41 millimeter Rolex Datejust, and you've got the basic idea. It's a little bit more graceful in form and traditional in shape, but if you can wear that, you can wear this, and it's a wonderful alternative to the common Daytona.
Okay. Quick question from Naresh Pape, if I'm pronouncing that correct. How does seiko enamel compare to the IWC dial?
If you're talking about seiko enamel, like you'd see on the Presage collection, it's not as good. I would say realistically, the one to get would be something like the SPB 073 that doesn't have a date, because as soon as you have that aperture in the seiko enamel dial, you start to see the limitations of $1,500 enamel dials. So the solid dials much more evenly distribute the enamel, whereas anytime there's an aperture in the dial, you start to see the edges of the dial base itself and the enamel thins out. This is much more uniform. I would say it's less ridged and roughed. You don't see the ripples and the orange peel that you see on seiko enamel.
Because not all enamel is created equal.
That's right. I mean, you do get something for your $300,000 when you buy a Patek Philippe Grand Complication with a black enamel dial.
Yeah.
But I will also say beyond that, there are probably more steps to the creation of the IWC lacquer dial, with more hand buffing and smoothing done, specifically to reduce let's call it the orange peel effect that you get on Seiko enamel, which is the best enamel, I'm going to say, for under $10,000. It's very impressive, but it's most impressive when you don't have the kind of dips and ridges in the dial that complications create.
Yeah. One more question from JBO Surf. Question, what do you guys know, if anything, about the Lunga sport watch being revealed next month? I know nothing other than literally the brand needs this thing to be a success more than anything.
What I have from a couple of different sources is that it's definitely going to be steel. It's definitely going to be on a bracelet. Unknown at this point, water resistance and whether it's a derivative of a current model like a Longa 1 Extreme, or is it an all-new shape? And it's going to be difficult because this is a very traditional brand. When they do stuff that's outrageous, it tends to be outrageous in terms of complication and engineering. Even with things like the Zeitwerk and the triple split, they haven't really changed their basic shape, and this almost needs to be changed, or it's going to look like a caricature.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to pull a little bit from Jaeger, we'll pull a little bit from,
Well, I think they're going to pull a lot of it from AP and
pull a little
Nautilus.
bit from AP.
Yeah, and not even the Aquanaut, just the Nautilus and the Royal Oak. If it doesn't compete with them on equal terms, then frankly, someone should be fired. And
it's hard, though. I mean, again, it's so the Nautilus and the Royal Oak, I think, are so ingrained into the consumer's mind that anything that remotely looks like it, I mean, again, it's immediately stomped upon. So I mean, it's difficult coming out with a new shape nowadays.
But you can do original shapes if you have enough imagination. I mean, you can look at some of the watches that don't necessarily follow the pattern, but look at things that never were before our era. Stuff like Resonance that's never existed before.
True.
I mean, you can go with like a Milanese sports bracelet. How cool would that be as opposed to just horizontal links?
Yeah, 100%.
And then I think it's also worth mentioning
that... Do a cool beaded bracelet.
Yeah, make it really thin, make it gorgeous, make it a no date, because if you look, what's the common thread between the Nautilus and the Royal Oak? They're 3-hand date watches. If you want to be really cool, make it a watch with 2 hands and no date. Ultra thin, as slim as you can possibly get. And then put it on a bracelet with an interchange system so you can throw it on a strap.
Okay, let's move on to the next piece.
Yeah.
So this is a watch that...
This is actually not a Nautilus knockoff. I'm going to come out and defend it right away.
Yeah, so this was a watch that I had the older version on the show before. We've never had this particular piece, and it was one of my favorite watches from the show that I said should get a lot more attention than it gets. So this is the 2018 version of the GP Laureato with the black dial and blue subdials, and I have to say, the watch was executed really, really nicely. It's got a rich look to it. It's an in-house GP movement, and if that is correct?
That is correct.
Okay. You've got a black waffle dial, blue subs, and it's just got an overall really rich look to the piece. And I would say that, if you're, don't want to spend the money on a Nautilus or a Royal Oak, or looking for a really nice watch that is off the beaten path, this, to me, is a great option.
I'll also say, to follow up, the original Laureato, integrated bracelet and case, came out in 1975, 1 year before the Nautilus. Was it in the spirit of its times? Yes. Could it have borrowed from the 1972 Royal Oak? Sure, but it was very much its own watch even then. And this watch continues that thread. Came out in 2018. We first saw the modern Laureato as an anniversary piece, 41 millimeters in 2016. We saw a production version the next year, and the chrono dropped last year, and it's the keeper of the whole collection. First, 42 millimeters in stainless steel. It wears really well. It's a nicely shaped case. As you can see, the lugs do drop down and around the wrist, so it actually conforms to your wrist fairly well. And you can see that the bezel is distinct from AP and Patek in that it is essentially a socket that fits into a tool, and it is part of the case assembly. So rather than being fixed in place by screws or bolts, it threads directly into the case. So being a mechanical fixture, it's very different in function and appearance from the other two. Now the watch is easy to wear. My wrist 16 centimeters, you know it well. It's graceful and it's an effective treatment of black and blue. You can see the interesting ways that the light catches the different textures of the dial, and it has a lot of personality and presence. If you look at the sub-registers, let's get really close here, but you look at the sub-registers, and this is where they could have done an easy concentric snailing or a sunburst, and instead they went for a matte channeling, a bunch of gadroons, and so it has a deep and textured concentric pattern that plays very different than a metallic sunburst or a concentric snailing. It's a little bit more insistent, it's deeper, it's more of a surfacing than an aesthetic. It has a lot of depth to it, and you can really see that from an angle. You can also see that there's a subtle black and blue medley formed by the metallic blue hands and applique indices, and if you look closely, you can even see those indices on the dial are cantilevered out over the dial center, which is a nice and thoughtful touch. This is really a sensitive, handsome, and effective rendition of an existing GP classic. Brian mentioned the old caliber, or reference, I should say, 8010 from the 90s. That was an Olympico previously featured on the channel, and this watch is the heir to that. It has a lot of continuity of design right down to the crown and the chronograph pushers, which you can see are the exact same form as the bezel itself, and that bezel does have a more mechanical and industrial look when viewed laterally. So this is a watch that's different enough while staying true to GP's own heritage, and as Brian mentioned, it's a caliber 3300 inside, so it's also in-house.
I wish it had a display back.
Yeah, that would maybe be the one change I would make. You can see it's 100 meters water resistant, but I will also say that the size of the 3300 is insufficient to the size of the case, so maybe that's what they had in mind.
But I would have been okay with a slightly smaller case. I think that the watch is like...
But would you have been okay with that case and a small movement and display case back?
Yeah. I mean, to me, it doesn't, again, I wouldn't have expected them to have to come out with an entirely new movement to satisfy the watch. I think, though, over time, it'd be a nice feature. But for right now, I probably would have liked having the display case back because it can't cost that much more to produce and execute.
No, it probably costs less to make a display case back.
Yeah.
It would have added thickness, though, and that's a very nice, very thin watch, under 12 millimeters thick.
Yeah, and it has the screw-down pushers here, so, it may have been a water resistancy concern, but...
I'll also say this. I would have liked to have seen the GP caliber 1800. It's their automatic with a longer power reserve, a little bit greater size. And Gesundheit, and I just would have preferred to see the 1800. I think it's time to retire the 3300s. They're ancient. They date back to 1994. They're too small for almost all of their cases, and while they look good and they can be made to run very precisely, I still feel like we need a new generation automatic in GP. GP, just give us the 1800 and all of your automatics and call it a day.
Yeah. Okay, so... we will move on to the next watch, and then we'll also answer some questions from the chat.
I should probably log into that channel. I'm looking at Watchbox reviews right there. Okay, what's up next?
Okay, so here we have a 18-karat white gold Chopard LUC. This is a automatic watch, and a couple really special features about the watch. Number one, it comes from the LUC manufacturer, which, for those of you that don't know much about Chopard, is their high-end technical watchmaking in-house manufacturer, and they produce absolutely amazing things, and I actually think that they don't get enough credit for the watches that they produce.
The fingerprints. Sorry there. My fault, guys.
So definitely not getting enough credit for the watches they produce. The dial, to me, is absolutely spectacular. You've got a view of the movement there in the center. You've got a very three-dimensional look, many different layers, luminescent syringe hands, which I'm an absolute sucker for. And I think that it was a beautifully executed watch from a brand who doesn't get enough credit for producing watches like this. Here on the back, you've got a micro rotor, and I happen to really like that they did it in 22 karat white gold to really give it a nice consistency there with the movement.
Now, this is an exciting watch on a couple of different levels. It's a double certification. Let me show you a few things about this. This is the Chopard LUC Tech Twist. It's a 39mm white gold watch that adds immense depth to the dial by revealing the movement plate. You can also see there's a little spinner that's attached to the top of the micro rotor, and it's present right there on the dial. So you can actually see the winding system in action as the watch moves around on the wrist. Cote de Genève onto the dial side. You can also see white gold hands with a lovely syringe taper and applique white gold radially arrayed Arabic numerals in high polish. There's a satin metallic hour track underneath that, and then you can see there's a small second at the base that is chronometer certified. Loomed dial, so you have the COSC certification, but then you turn it over, and you also have something called Qualité Fleurier. Now, that is the little Q you see right here. And the reason...
Fleurier.
Well, I'm trying to be francophone. We're friends here. And it is proximate to the area, Fleurier, where Chopard's manufacture is based. This can't be Geneva hallmark, because it's not made in the city or canton of Geneva. So companies like Vacheron, Chopard, and also Beauvais teamed up to create a rigorous standard that entails both precision and finishing, and it's available for watches that are made in Fleurier. So you wind up with the Qualité Fleurier, and Mike Michaels, when he was with us, was the first American ever to pass the Qualité Fleurier certification. So he was approved by Chopard, the manufacturer, when he was with Chopard to work on these watches. Automatic winding, 65-hour power reserve with a lovely satin-finished sunburst 22-karat gold micro rotor. You could see that the finish is effectively Geneva hallmark level, but again, it couldn't bear the hallmark because it's not made in Geneva. So you have that level of finishing, engine-turned perlage, black polished screws, mirrored partridge eye sinks for the jewels and the screws, as well as, and you can really see it from this angle, that mirrored anglage lighting up on the edge of every bridge. This is as good as Patek Philippe. This is as good as Vacheron. This is as good as AP at its absolute best. What it is also more exclusive than any of the above. Correct. This is a 250-piece limited edition, and I can tell you, I've probably held 6 QF watches since I've worked here, so they're uncommon. Throw it on the wrist. It's a great-looking watch, and I particularly like the case construction, which is sophisticated. You can see that the lugs are stepped. You can see that, like Brian said, it's a great 39mm size. It's nice and thin because of the micro rotor, and then it also has those stepped lugs, so it's not a simple stamped case. There is a little bit of nuance and character to the profile. You can really see how much those lugs bring to the total aesthetic of the watch. A really handsome timepiece and an unusual one. You can get Patek level finish here, but what you won't get on a Patek is this kind of style. Chopard's just a bit more adventurous with the way it styles its watches.
Exactly, and I think that a watch like this can be a little intimidating. They tend to have high retails, but for what you're getting and for the level of detail that goes into the watch, it's on par. And I think that it's the sort of piece that they depreciate quite a bit, buying them new versus pre-owned. But at the pre-owned level, you can pick up watches like this, I think, at an extraordinary price for the value of what you're getting.
Let's be frank, guys. This is Geneva hallmark level finish with a chronometer certification for under $10,000. In a manufacturer movement, micro rotor, white gold, limited edition watch. That's how appealing that thing is. So, let's be clear. You can get, like a GMT in steel and wait 2 years to buy it, or you can get that. You don't have to ask me which I'd prefer. I like the watch that's a little bit outside the mainstream, and I like the watch that's handmade. When you're paying thousands of dollars, there's no reason to get an industrial product. Also, let's talk about watches that I think are highly practical, because this watch right here, well, that one is beautiful and accurate. This is the watch I would probably wear on a daily basis because it combines two of my favorite things: plenty of water resistance and an alarm. Brian, tell us about this.
So here we have the Jaeger-Lecoultre deep sea alarm watch. This was the limited edition piece. They produced a version for the United States and a version for Europe. This particular variation is the US version. How do you know this? It's just the Lecoultre on the dial, and it also has the deep sea alarm there written at the bottom. Very special watch. One of the first watches, I would say, that came out in a big way using the Fotina, that started that whole modern vintage trend. Watch was wildly successful. Both variations sold out very quickly. And just a very cool, practical watch that I think even to this day, folks that remember it coming out would say wow, one of the better Jaeger releases in a long time.
Yeah, a very cool watch. So $359 with the US dial and $959 with the European dial, which is the inverse of the original. The original watch was designed for the US market, so there were many more Lecoultre dialed timepieces when this came out in the late 1950s. 1959 was the first year it was available, and this was the first JLC diving alarm before the Polaris. The watch, of course, is a little bit larger than the original. It's 40.5 instead of 39.5, but in every other regard, this caliber 956 powered 2011 limited edition is a very true historical reference. First, look at the minimally beveled lugs. Look at the case profile. A slender case profile is one of the hallmarks of old school mid-century watch design. You'll also note that the bezel itself is more of a timing reference as it doesn't move. JLC's thought at the time was, well, the alarm is your timing reference, so you don't need a rotating bezel. On the dial, you have that lovely Fotina that Brian mentioned with radially arrayed indices for the minutes, as well as handsome syringe-style hour and minute hands. It is an alarm. I'm going to fire it up in a moment, but also important here is the fact that the watch uses a true plexiglass, and when you buy this watch, the kit from JLC included a spare plexiglass. That is for the tribute to deep sea. Throw it on the wrist. It's an easy watch to wear. Handsome. You're probably not going to take it diving on this leather strap, but it's a wonderful factory accessory. Just throw it on the tropic style, a hobnail, rubber strap that comes with it, and you're ready to go. It is a Memovox alarm. It has a wonderfully distinctive sound, so I'm going to fire this one up because by the way, the watch is 100 meters water resistant. I know you're going to ask. It's 100 meters water resistant, and it is a very vocal watch.
No, this is not the original strap to the watch. It's just one that was put on afterwards. That just happens to look awesome.
Now, this is a fun timepiece in almost every way a watch can be fun, because it, well, frankly, speaks for itself. And as someone who makes his living talking about watches, it's always wonderful when you can just put the burden on the hardware. So while I work my way through this, I may have to wind it one more time, but Brian is going to...
What am I going to do? Here we go.
Set the stage.
Here we go.
Frog in your throat? This is very true to the original because that's how the original sounded. Everything from the plexiglass to the shape to the size to the details. It is just a lovely and very faithful historic tribute edition that almost everyone loves. And there were a few red accented, I think 3 red accented charity pieces auctioned off designed by Mark Newson. If you can find those, give me a phone call, please. All right, let's finish with a bang. The best of lugs, the best of dials, the best of everything.
So here we have a very special watch on the show tonight. This is a Vacheron History Chronograph. In a platinum case, you've got a salmon dial. Absolutely gorgeous. Not the prototypical strap. Here we have a Jean Rousseau crocodile strap with rose gold stitching to match the dial. This particular example was produced in, I believe it was 1993 or 1994.
That's correct.
Features a sapphire crystal case back, which Tim will show you in a moment. And it's actually a Lemania movement inside. So this is the same movement that's inside a Patek Philippe 5070. And this watch is honestly just effing gorgeous. I mean, they produce very few of these with the sapphire crystal back. Most of them came with solid case backs. And I can't say enough good things about this watch other than I need it. Immediately.
This is an awesome watch. It's perfect. It's 36 millimeters in diameter, platinum salmon dial, and if you can look very closely, you can see there's a lovely sort of repeating textural motif. The watch itself is part of the Historique collection, which started in the early 90s, and this was one of the original Historique models. When it became the 47111, they generally had a display case back, but the 47101 that you see right here generally had a solid case back, so this is the best of everything. It's the original run salmon dial platinum case display case back Vacheron caliber 1141 based on the Lemania 2310 that, as Brian mentioned, is also in the Patek Philippe 5070 and in another form as the Omega 321 went to the moon 50 years ago. You could see the teardrop lugs of this case, which are welded on, beautifully executed. If Vacheron has one consistent design tradition through every era, it's highly stylish, one might even say raffish and aggressive lug profiles. And I should also mention that this watch, I believe, is a reference to the historic first half 20th century reference 4178 chronograph. Lovely, rounded, and hand-finished white gold baton hands. Those hands have a wonderful three-dimensional quality in person that's like what you will see on a Crivia or Roger Smith. It's that good. You can see outboard there is a tachymeter scale, and there's also a little sort of polished chapter ring around the center dial, as well as the subregisters themselves. Throw it on the wrist. If you asked me, would I rather have this or a Patek Philippe 5070G, I would say in a heartbeat this. If you asked me whether I'd have this or a 5070P, I would bleed sweat as I work to make up my mind, and I might pick this, because frankly, this is exceptional, this is exquisite, and this is the only one I've ever seen.
And even at 36 millimeters, because of the construction of the lugs, it actually fits larger. I would say, like, it definitely has the wrist presence of a 39 to 40 millimeter watch.
Yes, the lugs extend it considerably across the wrist. I'm looking forward to making a video of this watch, but overall, the nice thing about this watch is that it will fit any wrist, but it will not look petite, and that's a difficult constituency to satisfy because you almost always piss someone off, too big or too small. Well, this watch is really neither. It's just right.
Let's keep that shot going.
It is incredibly graceful, and of course, when you turn it over, the movement is just to die for. Is it Geneva hallmark? Well, no, but the Vacheron 1141 rarely is. Is it finished that standard? Of course. Now, I've examined these at 10 power under a loop, and I have no reservations. This is one of the best finished column wheel lateral clutch chronos you'll ever encounter. Overcoil hairspring, 5-position adjustment, 21 joules, and it has an enormous balance that's almost 1/2 of the diameter. It's almost the radius of the movement, beaten away at 18K. This is as good as it gets, guys. And right there you can see the hallmarking that allowed me to date this 1993 to 1995. You can see that little Ibex goat right there.
So show the dial one more time. There's one thing I want to point out there on the dial. So here you have, it's like a matte finish almost. Like there's not like a sheen to it, and it's hard to convey. But there's just because it's matte, you almost miss the texture that's there on the dial.
You can see
that
it from
comes
that
across
angle.
in the light.
It's a sort of checkerboard texture with each of the checkers having its own texture. And then you'll note it's distinct from the minutes track outboard, the seconds track, and the tachymeter, which is actually a buff, more of a gentle satin finish. And you'll also note, let's go one more time, that the registers themselves are satin. Let's take one question, and then we got a couple of young men who've got a jet. So guys, who is in the box? Jumping bump, 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 bump. Okay, Freddie Turner saying time to liquidate the collection. WC Brian is going to slap that out of Tim's hands and run, and you're not far off. That's pretty close to the actual truth. And then right here we've got Bob the Builder saying only 36 millimeter or smaller dress watches. Todd the VC is timeless grace, and then right here, bump. A question, guys. Throw me one question. Who will be the first to fire? Yes, lateral clutch chronograph, it's got some play in it.
Yeah,
okay,
I mean, this thing is just incredible.
All right, so the question then becomes, what's the best watch on the table? First one to answer wins a prize.
Yesterday during the Speedy Tuesday meeting, the guys from Fratello said that we are going to see a 321 steel before the end of the year. Can you confirm, Brian or Tim? I can't confirm, but I mean, I have to assume that if it's coming from a Speedy Tuesday meeting, they probably have some sort of inside source associated with the launch. But I would say,
money, guys, they're not going to give up the profit potential of mass producing that. What'll change is it won't be the like high complication shop manufacturer version that's in the platinum.
Yeah, but you know what? They should come out with the watch in stainless steel. I mean, they came out with the watch in platinum. It's accessible for a small amount of people, and I think that the 321 movement is something that Omega collectors and folks that want one of those old school watches want, and the only way to do that is to get into a stainless steel case.
Daryl S. Chopard picking the winner on the table. Oh, hang on. We have Kevin S. He was the first. The VC is our winner tonight. Kevin S., you have my gratitude and my thanks. That is the prize you win this evening. Like I said, we got a crew that's got a jet, and we really appreciate them sticking around. Brian, thank you for bringing incredible watches tonight.
No, thank you for joining me. This was fun. Ooh.
One more note. Everything you see here is for sale. Brian, if they want to reach out to buy the watches, what is the email?
Brian@govbergwatches.com. You can shoot me an email, and or we can hop on a phone call and chat.
Yes, reminding you, it's not a museum. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you guys for logging on, and see you guys next week for the Watch Insider.